Thank you so much for arriving into this online gathering. Wherever you're joining us from, we invite you to take a breath, settle in, and arrive just as you are. My name is Stacy Gunther, and together with Raja Kanuri, our tech host for this session, I am delighted to welcome you to session 4, When Rigor Forbids Insight, Mysticism and Transformation of the Researcher. That sounds really intriguing. This session is part of the 2026 MSR Research Colloquium, the mystical and research dwelling at the threshold of knowing, organized by the MSR Research Committee. Across this colloquium, we're gathering as a global community of scholars and practitioners to explore how mystical experience may be embodied, researched, taught, and brought into leadership, management, and organizational life. And over these sessions, we will invite you to engage research not only as argument, analysis, or evidence, but also as encounter, as a way of attending to embodied experience, inner voice, higher consciousness, non-dual wisdom, and collective inquiry. So before we begin, a brief technical note. If you experience any technical issues during the session, please do a direct message to Raja through the chat and he can support you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Tom Culham. And as I prepared for this session, 3 things stood out to me about his work and presence in relation to today's topic. He is the current chair of the MSR division. We're so grateful for your service, Tom. He also lectures and conducts research at Simon Fraser University, and he's earned his PhD late in life after a successful career in engineering and as a senior business leader. With that, I warmly welcome Tom and invite us all into this session with curiosity, presence, and openness to what may emerge at the threshold of knowing. Tom, take it away, please.
Thank you, Stacy. I'm going to quickly move to just a little bit about MSR. You can read this. For those of you who are not members of MSR, I just want to encourage you to consider if you're here in this space. We are a community, a welcoming community. Many academic communities are quite critical, but I think one of the things that we offer is a place where you can explore all kinds of things and not feel judged, but feel welcomed into a space that's very open and about exploring meaning, purpose, spirituality, all these sorts of things, and ways of bringing that into management and transforming management. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to a mystical interlude. Um, I'm trained as an engineer. I never wrote poetry before, but for some reason, maybe when my grandchildren started arriving, I started writing poetry. So I'm just going to share this short poem with you. Um, it starts, Dawn, before breath moves. The lake holds the real and dream. A puff of air becomes a breeze, caressing waves, small awakenings to life. Sun rising catches ripples, becomes 1,000 diamonds, finer than any crown jewel. Evening returns to breathlessness. Purple, black, and deepening blue draw near. The moon rises and sinks, wobbling, skipping across lake's quiet undulations. It is fall now, yet the lake still warm, releases summer's secrets at dawn into crisp, cold air. Wisps of memory drifting. Those memories turn to Chartres, France, stone lifting to sky, so far and yet near. Shafts of sunlight pierce leaded glass, catch dust in the air, trace imperceptibly across the floor, unbeknownst illuminating souls past and present. Then resting upon the head of an unsuspecting soul, offering a sudden knowing, a lightning awareness of something beyond the veil. So deep, so humbling, just like dawn before breath moves. And I'll just leave you with that for 30 seconds. Just let that sit in, sink in as a contemplative exercise. So we heard a lot about mysticism from a number of perspectives from Andrew Newberg this morning, and I wanted to go back into Western roots of mysticism. It's obviously it's not the only place where mysticism comes about, but we're in the West, most of us anyway. I thought I would pay some attention to this. The ancient Greek word mio means to close, particularly the eyes or lips. And this reminded me of a Taoist saying, which basically suggests that you should close your eyes, close your mouth, close your ears, and go inward. So basically cut out your access to the external world and focus inward. So there's some interesting parallels there. Mio comes from the noun mysterion. That's a Greek word referring to sacred rites that are available through initiation. The ancient Greek contemplative communities, they considered that knowledge was not conceptual or propositional, but experiential. That means that you obtain this knowledge through participation, through involvement in practices that result in existential transformation. This statement, it also parallels the ancient Taoist concept of their view was that they were not concerned about conceptual knowledge, although it's recognized as having value, but the most important thing was to go inward and understand the realities of nature. What I mean by nature is the Tao, meaning God in our language. From its earliest usage in the West, mystical knowledge denoted participatory insight rather than conceptual knowledge. And as I pointed out, this is similar to Eastern contemplative traditions. And I think Andrew mentioned that this morning. So mysticism is a mode of knowing. It's rooted in, as I've said, action, participation, transformation, and direct awareness. It's not indirect awareness, which is what conceptual knowledge is all about. Its application in contemplative traditions across cultures reflects a shared knowledge structures rather than doctrinal uniformity. And I think we again heard from Andrew this morning when he was talking about the many mystical traditions. He was basically saying we can observe these behaviors across different kinds of knowledge and different cultures and individuals, but there are structures in the brain that support certain kinds of knowledge. So this is phenomenological rather than conceptual. When distinguished from both scientific rationality and esotericism, mysticism emerges as a rigorous and historically grounded category within the study of human experience and religion. Uh, and I was in a breakout session this morning, and it was mentioned that you can be rigorously subjective. I think that's an interesting concept here. Therefore, contemplative experiential practices or mystical practices reveal knowledge of ultimate reality or enlightenment to the individual. And the word enlightenment here refers to non-conceptual knowledge as opposed to the enlightenment that Andrew Newberg was talking about this morning. He did make the distinction between the enlightenment that came out of Western world starting in the 17th century. That was focused on developing conceptual knowledge as opposed to spiritual, religious, mystical knowledge. And it was a response to the overdevelopment and they call it the scholastic movement in religion. So that was what it was about. But enlightenment here refers to knowledge that you gain through contemplative practices. And Huang Po, a 7th century Zen Buddhist, he summed it up by saying, give up all indulgences in conceptual thought and intellectual processes. When such things no longer trouble you, you will unfailingly reach supreme enlightenment. So it's a very different view on enlightenment than the Western tradition. How does mysticism compare to science? Obviously, you could say a lot more than this, but this is a very top line of view. We all know that scientific knowledge prioritizes third person observation, measurement, and predictive explanation. Mystical knowledge, on the other hand, differs and particularly regarding the subject. It is a first person, participatory, and validated through transformation. This is interesting. In science, we look for repetitive knowledge that predictive explanation means we can do experiments over and over and get the same result. In mystical epistemology, the measure of its success is the transformation of the subject. Has this person changed? Has their view of the world changed? And we heard again from Andrew this morning, Andrew Newberg, in their studies of subjects who have had mystical experiences, one of the typical outcomes is a transformation of the individual's view on life and their behavior. This distinction does not entail irrationality. Rather, mystical traditions commonly treat conceptual reasoning as necessary but insufficient for realizing ultimate reality. A further really interesting idea, and I think this was touched on by Andrew, mysticism is a process. It's not a single dramatic spiritual experience or epiphany. It's a lifelong process. And again, he's talking about transformation here. It involves the development of conscious awareness of spirit, you name whatever sort of divine idea that matters to you, spirit, oneness, the divine, God, Shiva, whatever it is, that results in a transformation of the individual and others. What happens, and this speaks to management, when the individual changes based on these experiences, they influence others to change just through their behavior. And it's also important to note this idea of consciousness. So this includes a bunch of things. So a range of personal experiences, such as self-awareness of sensation, thinking, loving, deciding, and the actual transformative experience. He doesn't deny the value or importance of epiphanies or experiences, but he claims that mysticism goes way beyond that to thinking, loving, and acting. What he means is after you've had these mystical experiences that can occur throughout your whole life, it transforms your thinking, your loving, and your action. So the mystical in MSR research. So here we are studying spirituality and religion in the context of management. We're also embedded in academia that has its roots in the Enlightenment project, which denied the value of spiritual experiences as something that was not solid, not something that you couldn't touch or deal with. So we're in academia where concepts are legitimacy. And what we're really trying to do is reintroduce something that was thrown out 300 or 400 years ago in the West. So this requirement of concepts as legitimacy, not spirituality, is the problem that we are facing. It's a cultural view of things as well. So that's why when you're talking to other people who are finance people, accounting, operations management, they just look at you with glazed over eyes and have no idea what you're talking about. And even in our community, we tend to be more conceptually oriented. In our retreat, for example, we had people who are deeply engaged in spiritual practices, but they're talking about them rather than engaging people in them. So it feels uncomfortable to us in a sense because we come out of this tradition of concepts as being most important. But individual first person, non-conceptual subjective experience is the foundation of spirituality. And in my view, teaching and research should focus on this first, not writing about it, talking about it, but by developing capability by doing it. Of course, we have to talk about it. Of course, we have to write about it, but that is secondary. A critical element of contemplative practices. Now, so I'm going to take you into an experiential exercise. A critical element of contemplation is attention. And I'll take you back to this, but what I'm going to ask you to do is pay attention to something here. And we're going to do two exercises, one that's focusing on a positive emotional event in your past, and one that's focused on a negative emotional event. So the first is I'm going to ask you to recall a positive emotional event that happened recently in your life. When you're recalling it, I want you to recall the physiological experience or the physiological sensation related to that event. So maybe you were at a wedding, you weren't a person getting married, but you had a deep positive emotional experience related to that, or it could be anything else. Anything where you were listening to music that you love and you had an emotional experience. So recall something like that. You can write it down in a sentence for the purpose. This is priming you, uh, or or you can just recall the sensation, the physiological sensation. During this meditation, you do not have to recall this experience. You can forget it. I've primed you by asking you to do this. So take a few seconds to just recall this event and its physiological or the sensations related to it. Okay, so we're going to meditate for about 5 minutes. You can sit comfortably, close your eyes, breathe naturally. And during the meditation, just pay attention to your breath and note any physical sensations you have during the meditation. And I will ask about that afterwards. So we can start now. So just close your eyes, breathe naturally. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to return to the room. And just before I ask questions, I just want to lay this out for you. Neuroscience research shows that in terms of how our emotions arise and thoughts arise, physiological sensations are foundational to emotions, and emotions are the foundation of our thoughts. Our values are based on unconscious embodied emotions, which means when you make an ethical decision or a value-based decision, you actually don't know why you made it. You make up a reason, but you don't actually know. And anyway, the reason I want you to focus on sensation is they're the foundation of everything else. So I'd like to hear from anybody who would like to talk about what physical sensations did you notice during the meditation? I could go on with other people, but I think I'm going to move on to the negative mo emotional experience and then see what we get here. So I'd like you again, only this time I want you to recall a negative emotional experience that occurred in your life. Uh, again, you can either write it down or recall it as a physiological experience. Maybe you were driving down the road and nearly got into a car accident, when your whole body jerks and stuff. That's a physiological experience. But you come up with whatever was not pleasant for you in your everyday life, something that gave you some kind of negative negative experience, negative emotional experience, and we'll just meditate for 5 minutes, and then we'll have the similar conversation after that. So please sit comfortably, close your eyes, breathe naturally, and during the meditation, pay attention to your breath and note any physical sensations you have during the meditation, starting now. Okay, I'm going to call you back to the room, and I'm going to ask same questions. Anybody want to um, speak up?
3:43. So we're 43 into the
Yeah.
presentation. If you wanted to move in breakout rooms, this is probably a good time to do it.
Um, okay. I need to put some, I'm going to pass this. I need to put some statements here before we go into the into the breakout rooms. So, in this experience, you applied your mind and everyday attention to obtain information about yourself. I did not tell you to do anything with your attention other than to use it. In contemplative practices, you can improve your attention so you experience something called one-pointedness. This is called samadhi. Or you can even go to another level, which is called jhana, where your meditative absorption, you're completely absorbed in the meditation and all distractions fade away. There are many deeper levels of awareness that we can achieve through meditation. You have just practiced everyday attention. There's this idea of radical empiricism. It's not a new idea. It was coined by William James in the early 1900s and adopted by Alan Wallace, a Buddhist. It holds that every experience that appears is valid as part of research. Not only sensory data, but relations, qualities, states of consciousness are all empirical. This is what I was trying to kind of get at with you, mostly the sensory data. Then you can relate it to these other things. And introspection, if discipline, is a legitimate mode of knowing, which Buddhism systematized much earlier. This creates a rigorous phenomenology of mind trained through attention, mindfulness, and introspection. I just want to, I think what I'm going to do, Stacy, is skip the feedback and go through this because I think these are really important ideas. Skip the breakout sessions. So early empiricism was really moved forward by Galileo. This is the empiricism which is focused on looking at physical objects, which is essentially the orientation of our science. At that time, the telescope was the instrument that was further developed by Galileo, and he's showing it off to a few young ladies here. What he did was he changed the worldview by refining an instrument and his attention. He increased the telescope power from 3, which is hardly anything at all, to over 10 by refining the lens. And by paying attention to Jupiter and its moons for several weeks, he figured out that the sun, not the Earth, was the center of the solar system. And what you see on the left-hand side of this page are his notes and his pictures of what he saw. The bigger star is Jupiter, and the little stars are the moons. And by watching them, he figured out that all the planets were going around the sun, not the Earth. And that, as you know, if any of you followed this, challenged the church, challenged all kinds of ideas at the time. So 500 years later, maybe 600, we have the Webb telescope. Here's an image of Jupiter and its moon, Io, credited to NASA. You can tell, obviously, the quality of what is available to be seen is much greater. Here's another image from the Webb telescope. I have no idea what this actually means, but it's dramatic and amazing. It's something out in the universe that's fantastic. The parallel I'd like to draw here is we've got Galileo's empiricism. His instrument was a telescope. He refined the lens, and he was able to see things better in the external world. Radical empiricism takes the mind and attention as the instrument. The refinement process is meditation and concentration, and we are observing internal thoughts, sensations, and consciousness. Imagine if we had focused on improving our instrument and our refinement process back in 500 years ago, where we would be today if we had the same skill set or advanced skill set that we have developed on the observation of external things. And just very briefly, there's another parallel here. Ian McGilchrist identified left and right hemispheres in the brain, consciousness related to them. The left hemisphere is about, in terms of epistemology, focuses on abstraction and concepts, while the right is focused on lived experience. The other important thing here is the left is about dividing things. It's self-centered from a values point of view, as opposed to the right. Its orientation is unity or oneness, and its focus is on what's called intrinsic values. Our challenge as MSR is to develop a spiritual research and education paradigm to enhance right hemisphere consciousness to the same extent we have enhanced left hemisphere consciousness. And the core of this approach is radical empiricism, meaning observing our internal states. I am not going to do this. So, a summary of where we're at. The meditation experience at the beginning that we participate in is a basic application of the instrument of the ordinary mind and attention. Deeper levels of attention are known in the traditions. Taking empiricism applied to the material world as an example, huge strides have been made over the past 400 or 500 years. The example of the 10-power telescope to the Webb telescope. We're just at the beginning of developing techniques for self-inquiry and management. Think about the transformation in business that might occur if every manager practiced the basics of applying mind to internal attention. We could go further. We could go to higher levels. But basically, we're saying everybody has to have math to do business. Why not? Everybody has to be able to do self-inquiry. And people who wanted to go higher could be like high-level physicists, trained for years and years and have much deeper levels of knowledge. Mysticism is first-person research. Our path forward as MSR is to articulate secular techniques for management development supported by science and to develop deeper levels of attention to our inner world, just as scientists have applied this to the external world. And there are places where this knowledge exists. We could draw on it to develop pedagogy and experiences that would be very helpful in supporting the development of first-person spiritual research. Many people think of first-person spiritual research as qualitative research, as reporting out, but I'm talking about helping people penetrate deeper and deeper into their interior consciousness states. So I guess we could do a 5-minute breakout here, Stacy. What do you think?
You
Or do we
may,
do questions?
yeah, I would do questions. And the reason is that I think if by the time they get in there, they would have to go so fast and then they wouldn't
Yeah.
have time to
Let's
share
let's just
back.
let's
Keep
just do
going.
questions. Let's just do questions.
Great.
And here's what I'll say. If what I've said, you find this really exciting, if you would like to work on this, if you would like to contribute to this, maybe reach out to me and let me know. But let's just open up the questions, and I'm going to stop the sharing.